want to start with a specific image. Imagine a modern urban professional.
Oh.
They wake up, they check a sleep tracking ring that syncs to the cloud, they use an AI assistant to summarize their emails, drive an electric car that basically drives itself, and they spend their day navigating a global digital economy.
Right, the world of pure tech, pure data.
Exactly. By all metrics, this person lives in a world defined by material science, by algorithms, and by observable, repeatable data. And yet, statistically speaking, there's a better than 50% chance that this same person, at some point in their week, engages in a ritual that is thousands of years old. They might pray to an invisible being, they might meditate on a text written in the Bronze Age, they might gather in a room to sing songs about the afterlife.
It is the great paradox of modernity, isn't it?
It really is, the persistence of religion. If you look
Yeah.
at the trajectory of the 20th century, specifically the mid-century, the academic consensus, the smart money, was on the secularization thesis.
Oh, absolutely. That was the dominant idea.
The idea was that as modernity, science, and technology advanced, religion would just inevitably retreat into the history books. It was seen as a pre-scientific way of coping with the world, and once we had antibiotics and meteorology, we wouldn't need it anymore.
Right. Freud called it an illusion. Marx famously called it an opiate. The expectation really was that we would just outgrow it.
But we haven't. Not only have we not outgrown it, but in many ways it's evolving. It's finding new footholds in this exact tech-driven world we just described. So the question we are tackling today isn't theological. We're not asking if the object of that belief is real. We're not debating the existence of God. That is a different show entirely.
We are strictly looking at the mechanism.
Exactly, the mechanism. We are asking, why is the human brain so sticky for this stuff? Is it a cultural accident? Is it just a habit we picked up? Or is it hardwired into our biology? Are we, in a literal sense, programmed for faith?
And to answer that, you have to move beyond just philosophy or sociology. You really have to look at the machinery. And we have a stack of research today that is, honestly, pretty heavy.
It's a big one.
It is. We've got a comprehensive 2026 review from Psychology Today, which aggregates 40 years of data on religious involvement and mental health. That one is a monster.
40 years of data.
40 years. Then we have a fascinating and I think kind of surprising 2025 study out of St. Kitts and Nevis on something they call cognitive resilience in the digital age.
That St. Kitts study is wild. I have to say I did not expect to see prayer and social media algorithms in the same data set. It feels like two different worlds colliding.
It's a crucial piece of the puzzle, you'll see. And then we've also got a 2025 study from Efremov on U.S. religious identity and demographics. And we're going to be leaning really heavily on the academic framework of CSR, the cognitive science of religion.
Okay, so the mission today is to completely bypass the is it true debate and get right into the how does it work debate. The hardware of the brain, the software of culture, and how it's all functioning or maybe malfunctioning in this crazy digital environment we all live in.
I think that's the perfect way to frame it. Hardware and software. It gets us right to the heart of the cognitive science.
All right. Let's start with the hardware then. You mentioned CSR, the cognitive science of religion. This feels like a relatively new field compared to, say, theology or anthropology, which are ancient. How did we get from just studying religion as rituals and old pottery to studying it as an actual cognitive function?
Well, for a long, long time, the study of religion was really the domain of the humanities. You studied the texts, the history, the cultural impact. It was viewed as something nurtured. You believe what you believe because your parents taught you, or because your culture imposes it.
Which is obviously true to an extent. I mean, if I'm born in 12th century France, I'm probably Catholic. If I'm born in 12th century Baghdad, I'm almost certainly Muslim.
Yeah.
The environment matters.
Of course. That's not in dispute. But that doesn't explain why the capacity for religious belief exists in the human species at all. Why is it a universal? The big shift happened with what's called the cognitive revolution back in the 1950s.
Right.
That's when science started treating the mind, not as a blank slate, but as an information processing system, as something with a specific, evolved architecture. So by the 1990s, researchers began applying the tools of evolutionary psychology to religion. They started asking a new question. What are the survival mechanisms that might accidentally produce a belief in gods?
And this brings us right to one of the absolute core concepts of CSR, HADD, the hyperactive agency detection device.
Yes. Justin Barrett and Stuart Guthrie are the big names you'll see associated with this. And that name, HADD, is so descriptive.
I love the term device. It really makes it sound like a physical organ, like the appendix or something, but it's really a functional bias, right? It's a setting in the brain.
It's a default setting in the brain. And to understand it, you have to go back to the environment where our brains evolved, the Pleistocene. You are a hunter-gatherer. You are walking through the tall grass.
It's always the tall grass, the primal scene of evolutionary psychology.
It's the classic scenario because it works so well to illustrate the point. You hear a noise, a rustle. Your brain has incomplete data. It's just a sound. You have to make a snap decision. Is that noise caused by the wind, an inanimate, non-thinking force? Or is it caused by a tiger, an agent with intention, with a mind?
And this is just basic signal detection theory, right? You have a signal and you have noise, you have to interpret it, and you have to do it fast.
Exactly. And in evolutionary terms, the cost of getting the answer wrong is not symmetrical at all. What's played out if you assume it's the wind, but it's actually a tiger.
I'm dead, I get eaten, my genes do not get passed on, that's a false negative, I failed to detect the agent that was there.
Right. That error is fatal. It's an evolutionary dead end. But now let's flip it. If you assume it's a tiger and you jump back, heart pounding, and it turns out to be just the wind, what happens?
I get a spike of cortisol, I probably look a little jumpy to my friends, maybe I get laughed at, but I'm alive. That's a false positive. I detected an agent that wasn't there.
Precisely. The cost of a false positive is caloric. You wasted some energy running away from nothing. The cost of a false negative is existential. So over hundreds of thousands of years, natural selection aggressively favored brains that were hyperactive in detecting agency. It's a life-saving bias.
So we are literally the descendants of the paranoid.
We are the descendants of the people who saw faces in the clouds and heard voices in the wind and jumped at shadows. The calm, rational ones who waited for more evidence, they got eaten.
So the theory is that this mechanism, which is designed to keep us from getting eaten by predators, it doesn't just turn off when the threat is gone, it just keeps running in the background.
It keeps firing. It's our default mode.
So we look at a thunderstorm or a plague or a beautiful sunrise, and our brain unconsciously asks, who did this? Not what did this?
It seeks an agent. It seeks a mind behind the event. Guthrie argues that this is the cognitive seed of all animism and theism. We project human-like agency onto the non-human world because our brains are fundamentally wired to prioritize agency over randomness. It's the safer bet.
It's cognitively safer to assume a ghost slammed the door than to assume it was a draft, at least in terms of how our lizard brain is wired. But okay, this only explains why we might believe in spirits or ghosts or some vague sense that there's something out there. It doesn't really get us to complex, organized religion with doctrines and scriptures and all that.
No, it doesn't. You're right. HEDD just gives you the raw material, that powerful intuition that someone is there. To get to organized religion, you need stories. And more importantly, you need stories that stick. You need cultural transmission. And that brings us to the next piece of the cognitive hardware, minimally counterintuitive concepts, or MCI.
This is Pascal Boyer's work. I find this so fascinating because it feels like it bridges cognitive psychology and meme theory. It's about what makes an idea viral to the human brain before we even had a word for that.
That's a great way to put it. Think about the severe limitations of human memory. We are just terrible at remembering random lists of facts or abstract data, but we are excellent at remembering things that fit into our pre-existing ontological categories.
Yeah.
We have a mental folder for what a person is, what an animal is, what a tool is, what a plant is.
Right. If you tell me there's a brown dog in the yard, I understand it instantly. It fits my animal category perfectly. No friction.
But you also might forget it in 5 minutes. It's too intuitive. It's mundane. It doesn't snag on anything in your memory.
Okay.
Now, on the other extreme, if I tell you about a being that exists only on Tuesdays, is made of abstract algebra, smells like the color blue, and has negative mass.
I'm already checking out. My brain just slides right off of that. I can't visualize it. It breaks too many rules at once. It's what you'd call maximally counterintuitive.
Exactly. It creates way too much cognitive load. Your brain doesn't know what to do with it. But the sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone for memory and transmission, is the minimally counterintuitive concept. This is an idea or an object that violates one major expectation of its category, but it preserves all the others.
Give us the classic example.
A talking tree. It preserves almost all the physics of a tree. It has roots, it has leaves, it's made of wood, it's solid, it fits the plant folder. But it violates one key expectation. It has a human-like mind. It can talk.
Or a ghost.
A perfect example.
Yeah.
It preserves the psychology of a person. It has memories, emotions, intentions, but it violates one key aspect of physics. It can walk through walls.
So these concepts are sticky because they grab our attention by breaking a single important rule, but they are easy to process and remember because they keep all the other rules intact.
That's the core idea.
Yeah.
And Boyers and other cognitive scientists have done studies on this. They give people lists of concepts, some normal, some minimally counterintuitive, some maximally bizarre, and the MCI concepts are recalled significantly better than the others, days and weeks later.
So over thousands of years of cultural evolution, of oral storytelling around the campfire, the religious stories that survived and spread were the ones that hit this cognitive sweet spot.
Exactly. The stories about virgin births, burning bushes that aren't consumed, talking animals, gods who can walk on water.
It's almost like natural selection for ideas. The boring gods who just sat there, they died out. The two weird, abstract, philosophical gods, they died out. The MCI gods survived and thrived.
That's the byproduct view in a nutshell. It suggests religion is what the great evolutionary biologist Stephen Jay Gould called a spandrel.
A spandrel.
In architecture, a spandrel is that triangular space that's formed between two arches. It's not there because the architect specifically designed a triangle. It's there as an inevitable byproduct. If you put two round arches together to hold up a dome, a triangle inevitably forms in the space between them. It's a side effect.
So in this analogy, HADD and MCI are the arches. They are the useful, adaptive survival tools, and religion is just the accidental, non-functional space in between them.
That is one dominant view in CSR. We didn't evolve to believe in God. We evolved to survive, and belief is a side effect of the tools we developed for survival. But that's not the only view, not by a long shot.
Right, because if religion was just a useless side effect, wouldn't it be incredibly expensive? I mean, think about it. Building massive cathedrals, sacrificing valuable livestock, spending hours and hours in prayer, that burns calories, time, and resources. Usually evolution is pretty brutal about punishing waste.
Which leads us directly to the adaptationist view. Researchers like Richard Sosis and David Sloan Wilson argue that religion isn't a spandrel at all. It's a tool. It's a direct adaptation for group cooperation. Specifically, they argue it evolved to solve the free rider problem.
The free rider problem is basically the bane of any group project, right? You have 5 people supposed to be working, but one person does nothing and still gets the A at the end. They get the benefit without paying the cost.
And in a hunter-gatherer context, the free rider is deadly. If we're a group of 10 hunters and we're supposed to share the meat from a kill, and one guy consistently eats but never hunts, he drains the group's resources. He's a parasite. Groups that can detect and eliminate free riders will outcompete groups that can't.
Okay, so how does religion solve this? You'd think a free rider would just say they believe in the tribal god, eat the shared meat, and then go take a nap when it's time to hunt. It's easy to fake belief.
But is it? This is why religious rituals are so often difficult, painful, or expensive. This is costly signaling theory, and it comes straight from biology. Think about a peacock. Why does a peacock have that massive, heavy, brightly colored tail? It makes him slow. It makes him easy for predators to spot. It's a huge liability.
It's a handicap. It's actively bad for his personal survival.
Exactly. But it's an honest signal to the peahen. It says, I am so genetically fit, so strong and healthy that I can survive despite this massive handicap. It's an honest signal of fitness precisely because a weak, sickly bird couldn't afford to produce and carry such a tail.
Okay, I see where this is going. So applied to humans. If I am willing to fast for 40 days or undergo a painful adolescent initiation rite or give away 10% of my income to the group,
You are sending a costly and therefore honest signal that you are truly committed to the group and its beliefs. A free rider, someone who is just in it for the free meat and social benefits, would not be willing to pay that high a cost. So the cost of the ritual acts as a filter. It weeds out the fakers and ensures that everyone inside the circle is a true believer, or at least a highly committed cooperator.
and groups with high levels of commitment and trust cooperate better. They can raise bigger armies, they can build bigger irrigation projects, they survive famines better, and so they outcompete other groups and they pass on their genes and their religion.
Precisely. So now we have the hardware pretty well mapped out. On one hand, our brains are jumpy agency detectors that have a special fondness for sticky, minimally counterintuitive stories.
And on the other hand, we are intensely social primates who have evolved to use costly, hard-to-fake rituals to bond our tribes and ensure cooperation.
It's a very powerful combination. It explains both the believing part and the belonging part.
It really is.
Yeah.
But that's all deep evolutionary history. I want to talk about the software. How does this ancient machinery actually run in the modern world? What does it do to our mental health today? in 2026.
This is where we leave the African savannah and we enter the therapist's office.
And we have this massive review from Psychology Today, published this year, looking at the work of Dr. Harold Koenig. We're talking about a 40-year longitudinal look at the data on this.
It is exhaustive. It's really the definitive statement on the topic. And we have to set the context here. For a very long time, the clinical view of religion was pretty negative. In the 1980s, there was a famous fiery debate between two giants of psychology, Alan Bergen and Albert Ellis.
And Ellis was the founder of a major school of therapy.
A giant. He was the founder of cognitive behavioral therapy. And Ellis was not a fan of the faithful. He argued that religion essentially codified irrationality. He said things like, unquestioning belief is the enemy of mental health. He thought it created guilt, shame, and rigidity. He saw it as a pathology to be cured.
So he was very much in the Freudian camp on this.
Very much so. Bergen, on the other hand, argued the opposite. He said for many people, faith was a powerful resource for coping, for meaning, and for health.
And now, 40 years later, after mountains of data, what does the scorecard say?
Bergen won, hands down. The data is overwhelmingly on the side of religion being, on average, a net positive for mental health.
What does that actually mean in specifics?
The review aggregates hundreds of studies, and it finds that regular religious involvement, things like service attendance, prayer, scripture study, it predicts lower rates of depression, lower rates of anxiety, and significantly lower suicide rates.
Significantly lower.
In some studies, dramatically so. It also correlates with higher self-reported levels of well-being, optimism, purpose in life, and marital stability. The picture is pretty consistent across the board.
Okay, but we have to be really careful with correlation and causation here. Is it the religion that's doing the work, or is it just that religious people tend to have more friends and a stronger community? I mean, if I had joined a bowling league and I saw those people 3 times a week, wouldn't my mental health improve too?
That is the social support hypothesis. And you're absolutely right. A huge part of the benefit is the community. It's what some sociologists call the casserole factor. When you are sick, someone from the church brings you a casserole. When you are grieving, people show up at your house. That is a massive, massive buffer against depression and isolation.
So can I just join a bowling league and get the same effect?
You could, and it would absolutely help. Social connection is a powerful antidepressant. But the data suggests there is something specific about the religious element that adds value beyond just social contact. It's the meaning-making capability of religion.
This is the cognitive reframing aspect we hear about.
Right. A bowling league can provide company, but it probably can't tell you why your suffering matters. Religion provides what sociologists call a sacred canopy, a comprehensive framework that integrates suffering, tragedy, and death into a larger purposeful narrative.
So if I lose my job, a secular view might see that as just random, meaningless bad luck, which is terrifying.
It can be. A religious view, however, might frame it as a trial from God, or a lesson to build character, or part of a larger unseen plan.
It transforms the trauma from a random chaotic event into a purposeful event, even if the purpose isn't clear.
And that transformation is psychologically potent. It dramatically reduces the existential panic that often accompanies tragedy. The review also points out that clinical practice has completely shifted because of this mountain of data. Therapists are now routinely trained to take a spiritual history of their patients.
Which is a huge shift from the Freud and Ellis days of trying to cure them of their religious neurosis.
It's just pragmatic. If a patient comes in and they have a strong faith tradition, that is a resource. It's a tool in the toolbox. A therapist might encourage a depressed patient to reconnect with their faith community, not for theological reasons, but for the proven clinical benefit of social rhythm, meaning, and support.
However, the review wasn't 100% positive. You mentioned nuances. There is a dark side to this software.
There is, and the research is clear on this too. This is what's called negative religious coping. This happens when the religious framework itself becomes a source of stress.
How did that work?
Well, if your theological framework tells you that your depression is a punishment from God for some sin you committed, or that your anxiety is just a sign of weak faith,
Then the religion isn't a comfort, it's a weapon you're turning on yourself.
it amplifies the distress. It adds a layer of spiritual guilt and shame on top of the psychological pain. Or if you are praying for a cure that doesn't come, and you interpret that as divine abandonment or punishment, that can be devastating.
So while the aggregate data is very positive, the individual experience depends heavily on the content of the belief and the nature of the specific community. Is it a supportive community or a punitive one?
Exactly. It's not a magic pill. It's a complex tool that can be used for healing or for harm.
I want to pivot now to what I think is the most surprising and, frankly, the most forward-looking part of our source stack. We've talked about the savannah and we've talked about the clinic. Now let's talk about the smartphone.
The Chirima study from 2025.
Cognitive resilience and religious faith in the digital age. This is a case study out of St. Kitts in Nevis. First, just to ground us, why St. Kitts? It seems like a very specific place.
It's a fascinating choice for a study site. Small island developing states are often overlooked in major research, but they are perfect petri dishes for this kind of study. St. Kitts has a very high rate of digital penetration. Smartphones are everywhere. Everyone is on social media, dealing with the same global information flow as someone in New York or London.
Okay.
But at the same time, it retains very strong traditional religious structures from its history. So you have a population that is simultaneously hypermodern and deeply traditional.
The perfect place to see how those two forces interact.
Exactly. And the study was looking at a very modern problem, cognitive overload. This is something we all feel. The sheer volume of information, misinformation, outrage bait, and algorithmic manipulation we face every single day, it exhausts the brain's executive functions.
They call it mental fatigue in the study. It's that feeling, that your brain is just fried after an hour of scrolling through your feeds. You can't focus anymore.
Right. The study posed a very interesting hypothesis. Does religiosity act as a buffer against this specific kind of digital fatigue? Can it act as a form of cognitive scaffolding?
And the findings were pretty strongly affirmative.
They were. High levels of faith engagement, again, things like prayer, meditation, community worship. They correlated with stronger resistance to mental fatigue and also to social influence online. But what's really interesting is the mechanism. They didn't just say religious people are happier online. They broke down why.
This is where it gets into the actual cognitive mechanics. Let's talk about the first one. Attention regulation.
Think about what prayer or certain forms of meditation actually are from a purely cognitive perspective. It is the deliberate, sustained focusing of attention on a single object or thought and the active inhibition of distractions.
It's focus training. It's like lifting weights for your prefrontal cortex.
It is an attention gym. Now, contrast that with the digital environment, which is explicitly designed to fragment your attention, to make you click, swipe, and switch contexts every 15 seconds. The practice of prayer is a powerful form of counter-training. It strengthens the top-down control of the prefrontal cortex over the more reactive parts of the brain.
So the person who spends 20 minutes in the morning in focused prayer or meditation have essentially warmed up their focus muscles for the day. So when they open Twitter, they are just less likely to get swept away by the chaotic current of the algorithm.
That's the theory, and the data in the study supports it. Then there's the second mechanism, the analytical component. The study specifically mentions scriptural meditation.
Which is different from just passively reading a text.
Very different. The practice of exegesis, the deep interpretation of a text, requires you to slow down. You have to look at historical context, analyze metaphor, compare different interpretations, and synthesize a coherent meaning. These are incredibly high-level critical thinking skills.
And the study suggests that people who practice this regularly start to apply those same filters to other information they encounter.
That's the hypothesis. They are trained to look for the truth beneath the surface, to question the source, to not take things at face value. It's a kind of built-in skepticism.
That is deeply ironic, isn't it? The popular stereotype is that religious people are blind believers who just accept things on authority. But this research suggests that the practice of deep religious study might actually make you a more critical consumer of news and social media.
It absolutely depends on how it's taught, of course. It can also be taught as blind obedience. But the underlying mechanism of slow reading and deep analysis is undeniably a protective factor in a world built on fast scrolling and reactive hot takes.
Okay, and the third mechanism they found was the social buffer.
This is crucial for the social influence part of the study. A lot of social media works by leveraging our deep-seated fear of missing out and our fear of social rejection. We conform to the online mob, we adopt the popular opinion because we don't want to be isolated or attacked.
But if you have a strong, real-world, offline community,
You are just less desperate for online validation. If your core identity is grounded in a physical community that knows you and supports you, the likes and retweets from strangers matter a whole lot less. You're less susceptible to the emotional contagion of the internet because your fundamental social and emotional needs are being met elsewhere in a more stable environment.
So in this context, religion is acting as a cognitive shield. It protects your attention, it sharpens your analytical skills, and it grounds your identity so you don't get blown around by the digital winds.
And the researchers in St. Kitts framed this as a culturally embedded cognitive tool. I think that's a brilliant phrase. These aren't just quaint rituals. They are tools that cultures have developed over millennia to help us manage our own psychology.
Which begs the question, if these tools are so effective, why are the demographics shifting so dramatically in places like the US? Let's look at the numbers from that Efremov study from 2025.
The landscape is definitely changing, but it's complex. The headline number is that about 60% of Americans currently identify as Christian.
Which is still a clear majority, but a rapidly shrinking one.
A significant decline even over the last decade. And what you see is the famous rise of the knowns, the religiously unaffiliated, and about 15% strictly identifying as atheist. But the study uses a PESTEL analysis to explain why this is happening.
PESTE, political, economic, social, technological, environmental, and legal. Which of those factors is the heavy lifter here?
Technology and social are the big ones, and they're intertwined. The internet, more than any other single factor, has shattered what sociologists call the plausibility structures of local communities.
Explain that term, plausibility structure.
It's a great term. It basically means the social context that makes a belief system seem plausible, or even self-evident. If you live in a small town in 1950 where literally everyone is a Methodist, the Methodist worldview feels inevitably true because it is the only one you ever encounter. It's plausible because it is constantly reinforced and never challenged.
But if you live on the internet,
You encounter everything. Instantly, you can watch a debate between a Christian apologist and a Muslim scholar and an atheist biologist, all on YouTube, for free. You see other valid, intelligent, happy ways of living. The inevitability of your inherited faith just collapses.
so you have to actively choose it rather than just passively absorb it from your environment.
Exactly. And many people, when given that explicit choice, are choosing none of the above.
But none doesn't always mean secular or atheist, does it?
No, and this is a key nuance in the Efremov data. A lot of the knowns fall into the category of spiritual but not religious. They are rejecting the institution, the dogma, the hierarchy, the politics, but they're not necessarily rejecting the underlying cognitive mechanisms we talked about. They still crave meaning. They still crave community. They still feel that sense of awe.
So they are becoming their own theologians, assembling their own scaffolding from different sources. A little bit of Buddhism, a bit of Stoicism, maybe some yoga and mindfulness apps.
It's the marketplace of faith. Religion has become a consumer choice in the West. But the study also highlights the flip side, the social adaptation role of religion, particularly for immigrants. This is where the numbers for Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism are actually rising in the U.S.
Right. The study mentioned that for new immigrants, a religious organization, a mosque, a temple, a church is often the first stop.
It's intensely functional. If you move to a new country where you don't speak the language, you need a job, you need to find housing, you need a social network. Religious organizations provide all of that. They offer language courses, job counseling, social integration. So for these populations, religion is growing because it is providing essential survival services, much like the tribe did on the savannah.
So we have this really interesting divergence. For the comfortable, settled, third-generation American, the cost of institutional religion might seem too high, so they are drifting away into a personalized spirituality.
While for the new immigrant or the person in crisis, the benefit of that built-in community is undeniable, so they are leaning in hard.
That's a very plausible reading of the data, but we can't have this conversation. We can't talk about the psychology of religion without addressing the massive elephant in the room, the paradoxes. We've talked about all these benefits, resilience, community, mental health, but human history is also a catalog of religious violence, prejudice, and trauma.
The prejudice paradox. This is a classic, difficult problem in the field. Gordon Allport, who's basically the father of modern personality psychology, wrestled with this back in the 1950s.
And the paradox is this. Most religions, at their core, teach universal love. Love thy neighbor as thyself, do unto others, and so on. But for decades, sociological studies often show that, on average, religious people scored higher on measures of racial and ethnic prejudice than non-religious people.
It's a jarring, deeply uncomfortable contradiction. If the software is programmed with love, why is the output so often hate?
Did Allport figure it out?
He proposed a solution that is still the dominant framework today. He made a crucial distinction between intrinsic and extrinsic religious orientation.
This is the why you're religious question, not just what you believe.
Precisely. An extrinsic orientation means you are using religion. You are in that church or temple primarily for the social status, or because it's what good people in this town do, or to make business contacts, or for a sense of security. Religion is a means to some other end. Allport found that this group, the people using religion for social utility, were the ones driving the high prejudice numbers.
Because if you are using religion primarily to define your social group, you naturally have to have a strong definition of who is not in your group.
Exactly. It becomes all about in-group versus out-group. It's tribalism dressed up investments. The religion is just the uniform for your team.
And the intrinsic group.
These are the people for whom religion is an end in itself. They have truly internalized the teachings. They aren't there for status. They are there because they genuinely believe in the core dogma of humility, forgiveness, and universal love. Allport found that this group tended to be much less prejudiced, often even less prejudiced than the general non-religious population.
So the lazy headline, "Religion causes prejudice," is just sloppy science. It's more like extrinsic, tribal, utilitarian religion correlates with prejudice, while intrinsic, internalized religion correlates with tolerance.
Correct. But the deep problem is, from the outside, standing on the street, it's almost impossible to tell the difference. They both sit in the same pew on Sunday morning.
And this connects directly back to the dark side of the group dynamics we discussed earlier. The costly signaling creates a super tight, high-trust group. But that same mechanism can make the group intensely hostile to outsiders.
That is the double-edged sword of high social cohesion. The more you bond with the brotherhood, the more likely you are to dehumanize the other. The Kressel book in our source stack explicitly discusses religious extremism as a psychological phenomenon. It's not just bad theology, it's group psychology amplified to a terrifying degree.
It leverages that hyperactive agency detection device, that deep human need for certainty and that powerful need for a tribe, and it points it all at a perceived enemy.
And because the cause is framed as sacred, it can bypass our normal moral inhibitions against violence. If you believe you are fighting a holy war for God, then normal rules don't apply. That is the ultimate danger when the cognitive scaffold becomes a weapon.
We also have the painful issue of cognitive dissonance. The Efremov study touched on this when discussing identity.
This is so critical for mental health. Religion provides a comprehensive worldview, a map of reality. But if your own lived reality fundamentally contradicts that map, the mental friction, the dissonance, is immense.
And the most obvious painful example of this in the modern world is LGBTQ plus individuals in non-affirming religious traditions.
That is the most acute and well-studied example. If your scaffold, the very thing that gives your life meaning and connects you to your community, also tells you that your fundamental self, your capacity to love, is disordered or sinful, that causes profound psychological distress. The study notes that in these cases, all those mental health benefits we talked about can flip into reverse. It becomes a major source of anxiety, depression, and suicidality.
Because you are literally at war with your own coping mechanism.
Exactly. And this brings us right back to the developmental aspect. We're born with the hardware, like HADD, but the software is installed by our environment, by our parents. Lowenthal Book Review in our stack highlights the deep connection between attachment theory and our concepts of God.
This is the classic Freud-Bowlby angle. God is just a big father figure in the sky.
Freud was pretty dismissive. He saw it as infantile. But John Bowlby's attachment theory gives it much more nuance and power. The theory is that our early bond with our primary caregivers creates an internal working model for how all relationships work.
Yeah.
If you had a secure, loving, reliable parent, you tend to view the world and other people as generally safe and trustworthy.
And you project that onto God. God becomes a secure base, a loving parent.
But if you had a punitive, unpredictable, inconsistent, or emotionally distant parent,
God becomes the cosmic cop, the angry judge, or just the absent landlord who doesn't care.
yes, a large body of research shows a strong correlation between a person's childhood attachment style and how they experience God as an adult. So, in many ways, our theology is often just our autobiography, written in capital letters.
That is a heavy thought. It implies that our capacity for a healthy faith is deeply, maybe inextricably, tied to our capacity for healthy human connection in the first place.
They seem to be inseparable. You can't understand one without the other.
Okay, let's try to synthesize all of this. We have covered a huge amount of ground.
We certainly have.
We started with the basic hardware, the idea that we are natural-born believers. Our brains are wired to see agents in the wind, that's HADD, and to remember and repeat compelling stories about talking trees, that's MCI.
Right.
We established that this isn't just a glitch, it's an evolutionary feature, either as a byproduct of our survival systems or as a direct adaptation for building strong cooperative groups.
Then we looked at the modern data, and we saw that, despite the secularization thesis, religion remains an incredibly potent force for mental health, providing community, meaning, and a buffer against despair for millions.
And then, amazingly, we saw that St. Kitts evidenced that these ancient practices of prayer and meditation can actually act as a cognitive firewall against the specific challenges of modern digital burnout.
And we looked at the changing U.S. landscape, seeing this polarization between the rising knowns and the deeply committed, a shift driven by technology and the social needs of different populations.
And finally, we had to acknowledge the complexity, the dark side, the prejudice paradox, the pain of cognitive dissonance, and the deep developmental roots of our beliefs.
It's a messy, complex, deeply human picture. There are no simple answers.
So for the listener,
Yeah.
the person driving their car right now or doing the dishes or walking their dog, why does all this matter to them? What's the takeaway?
I think it matters because we all need to understand our own operating system. Whether you are a devout believer, a committed atheist, or just confused, and somewhere in the middle, your brain has this architecture. You have a hyperactive agency detection device. You crave narratives that make sense of the world. You have a deep biological need for a tribe, for belonging.
And if you aren't consciously filling those needs with a structured religion, you are absolutely filling them with something else.
Precisely. And that is the danger of the unexamined life in the 21st century. If you don't realize that you have a God-shaped hole, or maybe better, a God-shaped cognitive module, you might end up plugging it with something that doesn't fit as well, or is even toxic.
Like politics.
Politics is the big one today. We see political movements taking on all the hallmarks of religion. They have sacred texts, they have prophets, they have heretics who must be excommunicated, they have apocalyptic language about the end of the world.
Or consumerism and brand loyalty. Or, maybe most clearly, conspiracy theories. A conspiracy theory is just HADD gone absolutely wild, seeing hidden agents and secret plots behind every random event.
It engages the exact same machinery. So understanding the psychology of religion helps us decode the world around us. It helps us understand why our neighbor is so deeply committed to their church, and perhaps why our uncle is so deeply committed to his political cult. They are both running on the same basic human hardware.
It fosters a kind of empathy, or at least understanding. It moves us from that person is crazy to that person is human, and their brain is doing what human brains have evolved to do.
Exactly. It lowers the temperature a little bit.
I want to leave the listener with a final provocative thought to chew on. We kept coming back to that St. Kitts study and that metaphor of religion as cognitive scaffolding.
Yes. It's a powerful image.
A scaffold holds a building up while it's under construction.
Yeah.
Or it holds an old building up when the ground starts to shake during an earthquake.
Right. It provides external support when the internal structure is weak or threatened.
So, if we accept the premise that for hundreds of thousands of years, religion in its various forms has been the primary cognitive scaffold for the human mind, the thing that held us together against the terror of death and the chaos of nature.
And now, in the West, at least, for the last 100 years or so, we are rapidly and deliberately dismantling that scaffold.
We are taking it down piece by piece. The question is, what are we replacing it with?
Yeah.
And more importantly, is the replacement load-bearing?
That is the multi-trillion-dollar question for our civilization, isn't it?
Is consumerism strong enough to hold up the human psyche in a real crisis? Is techno-optimism strong enough? Is a vague sense of personal authenticity enough? Or are we stripping the walls down to the bare studs right before the hurricane hits?
If the current global mental health crisis is any indicator, the new scaffolding might be a little bit wobbly.
Something to think about next time you see a face in the clouds. Keep your HADD calibrated, everyone. Thanks for diving in with us.
A pleasure, as always.